All right. Good morning, everybody. Find a seat. Make yourself at home. Welcome those of you that are watching. Glad to have you. Welcome those that have joined us online. How about the weather change? Woo! Yeah. I looked ahead. I think next week we got 2 or 3 nights in the 40s next week, so that's even better. That's great. We went out and bought some wood so we can have fires, and so it's great. It's good. Just a good follow-up report on baby Asher that we've frankly been praying for off and on for about a year and a half, but continues to do well. All the plumbing is working. The pee and the poo are flowing. It's all good. It's all good. It's a winner. It's really, really good. Okay, I think that's it. Hey, if you're a guest this morning, this is my email. Please reach out to me. I think I had 2 couples last week that reached out, and I reached back out to them. And if you're here, again, as I said in my email, I really would love to meet you. So catch me after class today. Give me a chance to kind of get name and face together. But thanks so much for being here and for coming. A couple of social media things. One has to do with where we are on Facebook. Next, please, Gib. Okay, good. Journey Class Facebook. That's where you can find us there on online YouTube channel. This is where all of the lessons are, and will continue to be. But we're only broadcasting on YouTube now and not on Facebook. So that's where you'll have to go. Please subscribe, so you'll know every time they get uploaded to you. Okay, and then next is our series that we're in, and I want you to open your Bibles today. Let's start in Judges 13, Judges chapter 13. Grab that. This is number 6 in this life lesson series from mostly I would call famous Old Testament failures, some more famous as it were than others. Today, maybe the most famous really of all as we get into him. But I wanted to read, I know you're asking to turn to Judges, but I want to read something from 1 Corinthians chapter 10. I probably should have read this, frankly, when the series started, because there's such a great connection here in this passage that Paul writes in chapter 10. Paul says, 1 Corinthians 10, "For I want you to know, brothers, that our fathers," now he's looking back to Hebrew history and the history of the Jewish people. And he's reminding them that our fathers were all under the cloud. He's making reference to the cloud by day and a fire by night, and God's great guidance for them. All passed through the sea, talking about how they were miraculously delivered by God from the Egyptians. All were baptized into Moses. The idea there was, and God gave you an anointed leader, in the process, Moses, and all ate from the same spiritual food that God provided, the manna, and miraculously fed them all of those 40 years in the wilderness. And they all drank of the same spiritual drink, for they drank from the spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. I think that's a reference not just to the miraculous provision in the desert of water, but at least a pre-incarnate reference to Christ being the water of life and the rock. So he's just reminding his Jewish readers of all that God had done. And calling them out as a people and providing for them and protecting them as a people with promises. But verse 5 says, nevertheless. Whenever you read that in Scripture, that's never good. In spite of all of the advantages and everything that God had done for them, with most of them, God was not pleased. For they were overthrown in the wilderness. Here's what I want us to draw your attention. Now these things, what their history and what happened to them, especially in their failures to wholly follow the Lord. Now these things took place as examples for us, life lessons for us to draw from and to learn from, that we might not desire evil as they did, Do not be idolaters as some of them were, as it is written, the people sat down to eat and drank and rose up to play. We must not indulge in sexual immorality as some of them did, and 23,000 fell on a single day. We must not put Christ to the test as some of them did and were destroyed by serpents, nor grumble as some of them did, and they were destroyed by the destroyer. Now, these things happened to them as an example, but they were written down for instruction to whom for the end of the ages. In other words, whatever happened to them, good and bad, is to serve as instruction or as lessons, you might say, to learn from them. And with most of them, God was not pleased. With some that He was, but with many of them, He was not pleased. So they failed. Often they failed because the leadership failed. It began with Adam and Eve. And I think what got set in place there, and go to the next slide if you would. I think Adam and Eve and what caused their failure to wholly follow and to trust God. I keep saying it happens again today, and I've looked ahead to the next 3 weeks because the next 3 weeks and the final 3 weeks deal with the first 3 kings of Israel and their failures. And this theme is going to follow us all the way through, not just in their lives as failures, but my thesis is this. We fail for the same reasons. We fail because we don't trust who God is, especially His goodness. And the enemy is still at work as he was in the Garden of Eden, encouraging us that God cannot be trusted. He's holding out on you. He doesn't have your best interest in mind. All lies, but nonetheless, they still seem to work. Next, failure to trust what God says. Back up, if you would, what God says. His plans, His promises, especially those as we're looking at these Jewish leaders and the plans and promises He had given all the way back to Abraham that He promised. And yet they continued to fall into disobedience and to idolatry and to fail to wholly trust and to fail to wholly follow Him. And then what God does, especially when we look back at what God did in providing food, in providing guidance, in providing water, and all they wanted to do was complain and go back to Egypt. So I think these are the fundamental reasons, not just why they fail, but why we fail. As we've seen, some of them recovered. It's not that we can avoid failure, but we can avoid failure that doesn't leave us as failures. And it all depends on learning the necessary lessons to move forward and to be stronger in your journey. Some did. Abraham did. Moses did. But some didn't. Some didn't. Lot, Achan, and you're going to see today, as we look at the person for the day, they didn't. The struggle you're going to see more today than really in any of the others is that, I think I've said this to you before, we are a mixture of faithfulness and unfaithfulness. That's our story, everyone's story. No one is perfectly faithful all the time. Obviously, we want the trajectory of our journey with the Lord to be one that's largely one of faithfulness and obedience to Him. But we'll all have sprinkled along the way, hopefully not more than sprinkled along the way, where we were unfaithful, where we just simply did not do what He told us and instructed us to do. We didn't trust Him for who He is, what He says, and what He does. We just didn't trust Him, and therefore we stepped into failure and we stepped into sin. And we're going to see that, again today. So in Judges, if you turn there in Judges chapter 13, we're going to begin to look at Samson. He's probably the most famous. I read, let's see, where was that? I read not too long ago on the internet. Doesn't necessarily mean it's true, but 16 whales, beautiful whales, were found dead on the beach. They swam into shallow waters and were unable to return to the deep, and they died. No one knows exactly why it happened, but one expert said they swam ashore chasing a school of minnows. Whales chasing a school of minnows. You talk about trivial pursuit. We're going to meet today a person that epitomizes a life of unbelievable opportunity and blessing, essentially wasted. A man who lived on the edge of the cliff, pushing the envelope. A man who was physically strong, which is what we generally know him for, but morally and spiritually weak. One who, as you'll see, who got warning after warning after warning after warning. Stop it. And he ended up tragically and in a humiliating way committing suicide and taking with him several thousand of the enemy. It is a tragic story, but one that's been told over and over again. I checked. Some of you are old enough to remember the first movie made of Samson was in 1949. That was the year before I was born. Some of you were in your 20s and 30s by then. Okay. But you may remember the first Samson movie, a man by the name of Victor Mature, played Samson. Okay, and then there were subsequent to that, there were movies. It's hard to believe because this is not true of any other Bible character I know of except maybe Moses and Joseph. And in 1984 was another one. In 1996, and I had no idea. In 2018, there was a movie made for Samson. And whenever we think of Samson, we think of his hair, we think of his strength, and we think of a woman by the name of Delilah. So that's where we are. But let me give you a little bit of background. I want to go back to where we were last week. This is they came from Egypt and made their way up into the east of the Jordan River. And this was the land of Canaan, as it was known. It's kind of like the land of, say, United States of America. But it was made up of different, as it were, areas and regions where there were enemies. That's why you see the Canaanites really refer to the whole land, but you've got enemies all the way through here in the Amorites. Amorites are up here as well. You got the Girgashites. You got all the Perizzites, the Hivites. They got all sorts of ites everywhere. And God had told them, eliminate the enemy. I've given you this land. I will make whatever provision that you need to do. And they did not obey. They did not rid the land of the enemy as God told them. And it cost them dearly over, as you might say, over time. Because what happened when we come to Judges, Joshua has died. They had a strong leader in Moses, strong leader in Joshua, but he's dead. So hold your place and go with me to Joshua chapter 2. Joshua chapter 2. I got to give you a little bit of background. You want to understand what's happening here. This is the book of Judges, and it tells the stories of the people of Israel for the next 350 years after Joshua died. They are in the land, okay, but there are constant enemies coming against them and that they're battling against. In Judges chapter 2, in the opening verses, Joshua dies. Now pick up in verse 11. And the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. That will be repeated 12 more times. It's thematic. They did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and they served false gods. And they abandoned the Lord, the God of their fathers, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt. They went after other gods from among the gods of the people, again, the Canaanites that were around them, and bowed to them. They provoked the Lord to anger. They abandoned the Lord and served the Baals and Ashtaroth, which is just an idol. So the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he gave them over to the plunderers. Now, let me skip down to verse 16. Then the Lord raised up judges or deliverers, okay, who saved them out of the hand of those who plundered them. So what you've got happening for 300, almost and 50 years is a pattern happening to the people of Israel. That is, there's sin, there's apostasy, there's fallenness. They did evil in the sight of the Lord. And then as a result of that, God would let them defeated by the Philistines, the Midianites, the Amorites. Different enemies would come against them. And then they would put them in servitude for a season of time. Israel would call out to God, save us, save us, save us. God would send a deliverer, a judge who would come in and would prevail in the name of the Lord and deliver them again, and then it would happen again. And it would happen 350 years. 12 judges did that. When you get down to chapter 3, I won't read them all, but now these are the nations that the Lord left to test Israel by them. That is, all in Israel who are not experienced all the wars of Canaan. And without reading that, but all of these enemies that are up there, okay, on the map. Stay on the map, if you would. All those enemies that are up there, okay, were part of this struggle, doing that which was evil, as it were, in the sight of the Lord. So now come to chapter 13. Come to chapter 13. And I'm relying on you're having some familiarity with Samson's story. I don't have time to read because chapters 13, 14, 15, and 16 tell the story of Samson. But it's a pretty familiar story, especially the delightful side of it. But there's just no way I can read 91 verses and give you the full context of his story, so you'll understand the lessons that we need to learn by his failed example. But first, let's begin in chapter 13. Chapter 13 kind of introduces us to what I call his limitless potential. Unbelievable opportunity. And let me just kind of begin reading here. And the people of Israel again, what? Did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. This is the 12th time that this has happened. So the Lord gave them over into the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. For 40 years. And it was the dark ages. In fact, it's often referred to as the dark ages of Hebrew history during the season of the judges, because that cycle just kept going over and over and over again. And now it was Samson's turn to be the deliverer. He never fully, just like none of the other judges did, he never fully delivered the people. And I think part of that was because he never fully delivered himself. Hard to take people where you aren't. And he was unable to do it. But he born in this tremendous time of decadence and failure. But notice, beginning in verse 2, he was also born for a reason with a purpose. Let me read a little bit of his story. There was a certain man of Zorah. Go back to the map, if you would. I'm sorry. Here's Jerusalem, okay? This area right in here is, and down into Philistine, but this area right in here is where the tribe of Dan, and we're fixing to meet Samson's dad, Noah. But most of what we're going to read in chapters 13, 14, 15, and 16 are all taking place right here in this, in that area, that small area, okay? All right, let me pick up reading. In verse 2. There was a certain man of Zorah, which is in that region I just circled, the tribe of Danites, whose name was Manoah. and his wife, we don't know. We've never given her name. I just call her Miss Manoah. Okay, Miss Manoah. His wife was barren and had no children. We have that back with Sarah. We have that back with here with Samson. We have it again with Eli and Hannah. We have it again with Elizabeth and John the Baptist. And, of course, we have it again with Jesus. So here we have this person that shows up. And notice in verse 3, and circle this, and the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her. Circle that. The first time the angel of the Lord is referred to is, frankly, in the angel of the Lord showing up in Genesis chapter 16 with Sarah and Hagar. And the angel shows up to comfort Hagar when she kind of gets disenfranchised from the family by Sarah. And the angel of the Lord here, I won't read all of them, but in the next 20 verses, the angel of the Lord is referred to 12 times. Say, what's the point? Infrequently, okay, especially in the Old Testament, this phrase, the angel of the Lord, is used. Most of the time, an angel, an angel, an angel. My studied opinion is every time you see the angel of the Lord referred to, it is a reference to a pre-incarnate manifestation of Jesus himself. So Jesus shows up himself, pre-incarnate. And we don't have that many times. We have it more in the story of Samson than anywhere else. And the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman, and he said to her, behold, you are barren, you have not grown children, but you shall conceive and bear a son. So we got this promise. I mean, none of that, this miraculous conception, not promised to any of the previous judges nor any of the future folks. But Samson has this promise that basically he is born and conceived miraculously by his mom and dad. Let me read on. Behold, you are barren, you have not children, but you shall conceive and bear a son. Therefore be careful, and drink no wine or strong drink, and eat nothing unclean. For behold, you will conceive and bear a son. It's told her 3 times, you're going to have a son. Okay, I know it doesn't make sense. I know you're old, but you're going to have a son. No razor shall come upon his head, for the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb, and he shall save Israel from the land of the Philistines. So we got his birth, and then we got this vow. Now, I want you to turn back to Numbers chapter 6. And I want to read you a little bit about this Nazarite vow, which was usually temporary, short term. This is the only instance in Scripture where it was lifelong when it came to Samson. And here were the stipulations. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when either a man or a woman could take also a Nazarite vow. When either a man or a woman makes a special vow, the vow of a Nazarite, okay, to separate himself to the Lord, and you're going to see repeated, you're going to see this word, separate, 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 separate. The purpose of the vow was to separate the man or a woman for separation, for dedication to God, to live a holy life. Even Mrs. Manoah was called to that during her pregnancy. Now, let me read on. There were 3 stipulations here. Okay, let me begin in verse, a special vow, the vow of the Nazarite, to separate himself from the Lord. He shall separate himself from wine and strong drink. He shall drink no vinegar made from wine or strong drink, and shall not drink any of the juice of the grapes or eat grapes, fresh or dried, no raisins either. All the days of the separation, he shall eat nothing that is produced by the grapevine, not even the seeds or the skins. Okay, don't go near any kind of a vineyard whatsoever, is the point. Okay? Stay away. Because generally speaking, not always, generally speaking, where there is too much wine, okay, and too many women, yeah, you get the point. Okay? All right, you get the point, okay? All the days of his, verse 5, all the days of his vow of separation, no razor shall touch his head until the time is completed for which he separates himself to the Lord, for he is to be holy. He shall let the locks of his hair of his head grow long. No. But again, his wasn't temporary. It was lifelong. Okay? All the days, next verse, all the days he separates himself to the Lord, he shall not go near a dead body. Now, wait a minute. Not even for his father or for his mother or for his brother or for his sister, if they die, he shall not go near a dead body. So what you got here is you got no booze, you got no bodies, and you got no barber. Okay, I had to get a bunch of B's. I just couldn't refrain from doing that. Okay, so that was part of God's calling on his life. Okay, and then also in here, he was to deliver Israel. That was his mission. I already introduced you into his mom and dad. He grew up. He had godly parents. They prayed. They sought the Lord. They offered wisdom. I mean, Manoah was such a unique relationship with God, as was Miss Manoah, that the angel of the Lord appeared to them at least twice. And one time, it says down in verse 9, and the Lord listened to the voice of Manoah, and the angel of the Lord came again to the woman, and she took him to the man. They had, mom and dad were godly parents who sought the Lord, and the Lord listened to them. And if we will read further, they end up offering sacrifices and worshiping on behalf. This is a godly couple. Okay, I just want you. These are all the advantages that Samson was, I guess you could say, born into. And then let me get down to verse 24 and 25. And the woman bore a son. He called his name Samson. And the young man grew, and the Lord blessed him. The Lord blessed him. And the Spirit of the Lord began to stir in him between Zorah and Esco. 5 more times that phrase, and the Spirit of the Lord began to stir in him. Now, he had everything going for him, and yet he failed. How we finish, this is important for many of us in the room, if not all of us. We need to always remember how we finish is more important than how we start. I'm not saying how we start is not important, especially with the Lord, but that doesn't mean we remain strong to the finish. Okay? And this man had everything going for him, and he became a failure. So now let's shift gears to what I call his careless living. Okay? I can't read 3 chapters, but I can kind of capsule this man's life. And that's what I want to try to do here. I'll read a few verses here and there to give you some context. But he is a perfect example of a man who did some wonderful deeds for God, and yet at the same time was very unfaithful, especially at specific points of the Nazirite vow. Okay, now let me give you some highlights. Okay, first in chapter 14, Samson even went down to Timnah. Timnah's not far; it's in North Gaza, not far from where the tribe of Dan was, not far from his home. He saw one of the daughters of the Philistines. Who are the Israelites subjected to for 40 years now? The Philistines. Okay, and this is not the first. Okay, and there are at least 2 more times that he puts his eyes on a Philistine woman. They're captors, and he puts his eye on this woman. Verse 2, then he came up and told his father and mother, I saw one of the daughters of the Philistines at Timnah. Now get her for me. Get her for me as a wife. Godly counsel. But his father and mother said to him, is there not a woman among the daughters of your relatives or among all of our people that you must take a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? But Samson said to his father, get her for me. Okay. For she, now this is an ESV, but for she is right in my eyes. Okay. You look that up. In the Hebrew, it means she really looks good. Really looks good. Then Samson went down with his father, down a couple of verses, verse 8, to Timnah. So they pay attention. And there they came to the vineyards. Hello? There it came to the vineyards. Okay? And, he just lives on the edge all the time. Okay? Came to the vineyards, and behold, a young lion came toward him roaring. Okay? Then the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him. And although he had nothing in his hand, he tore the lion into pieces as one tears a young goat. But he did not tell his father or his mother what he had done. Why? Because they knew the Nazirite vow. So he didn't tell mama, daddy. Okay? Now, what you're going to say, wait a minute. And this is just the beginning. He's already disobeyed God being near a dead body. Okay. He's already gone to the vineyards. Okay. And this is only going to happen again and again and again. Again and again and again to him. So then he went down and he talked with the woman, and she was right in Samson's eyes. So you got the vineyards, and then you got probably the wine, and now you've got the immorality. After some days, he returned to take her. And he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion, and behold, a swarm of bees was in the body. They had made a hive in there, and there was honey. And he scraped out the honey with his hands. He's already violated two of the vows. Don't go near a dead body, human or animal. Not only does he end up being near the dead body, he goes back to it, and he takes his hand and dips honey out of it. I mean, he's living right on the edge, the carcass of what had happened. So he tears a lion apart by his hands. All right. Now, verse 10, his father went down to the woman, and Samson prepared a feast there as young men used to do. This is a bachelor's party. Okay? Samson, one of his problems was he was a loner. You never see him having good friends. As soon as the people saw him, these are the Philistines, his enemies, they brought 30 companions to be with him. Why? Because he didn't have any friends. So they bring in some of the enemies. So we got these 30 companions, all enemies, a Philistine woman that he wants to marry. Okay, in here they refer to him as husband, and they refer to her as wife. But you may remember from Jewish wedding lore, okay, as soon as the betrothal period began, they were considered to be husband and wife. But until they physically consummated the relationship on the seventh day of the feast, they were really not legally married, though they were referred to as husband and wife. So they're referred to here, but they're not legally, as it were, married. So, and Samson said to them, let me now put a riddle to you. If you can tell me the answer to this, then basically what he says, there are 30 of them, then I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 chains of gold. In other words, listen, guys, if you can answer this riddle, I'll get you 30 brand new suits. One for each one of you, brand new blazer, whatever you want. Okay? I'll get that for you. And here was the riddle. Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something to eat. Okay. Well, they couldn't figure it out. So day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4 go by, and they go to his wife. Not really yet his wife. And they say, entice your husband to tell us what the riddle is, lest we burn you and your father's house with fire. Okay. Get the answer of the riddle. Okay. Samson's wife, again, they're not really married yet. They haven't consummated, wept over him. Oh, man, it's getting worse. Listen to this. You only hate me. You do not love me. You've put a riddle to my people and you've not even told me what it is? And Samson said to her, I've not even told my mom and dad. And why should I tell you? Verse 17, she wept before him 7 days that the feast lasted. And on the 7th day, he finally told her because she had pressed him so hard. You talk about a nag. So she tells him the riddle, okay? And now they know the answer. They give him the answer. So now he's got to get them 30 garments, okay? And then he says to them, he says to the 30, if you had not plowed with my heifer, that is a reference to his wife-to-be, okay? You would not have found out my riddle. Verse 19, and the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him. He goes over to Ascalon, which is over on the seaport, and he struck down 30 men of the town. He killed 30 men and took 30 garments of them, and he came back and gives them to the 30 men. In hot anger, he went back to his father's house, and Samson's wife, stay with me, was given to his companion, his best man, who had been his best man. Okay. So we've got him tearing a lion apart, violating one bow, killing 30 Philistine men. He always had a problem with uncontrolled anger, not just lust, but uncontrolled anger. Chapter 15. After some days, at the time of the harvest, we don't know how long it was, okay? Samson went to visit his wife, not yet consummated, with a young goat. We don't know how long he's been gone. Okay, but he swelled up. He just swelled up and got angry and left. Okay, so her daddy thought, well, he's not coming back. So he gives her to his best man. He doesn't know that. Okay, and then he shows back up with a goat. It's kind of like a bouquet of flowers. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. And he said, I will go into my wife. Can we have sex? Can we consummate the marriage? But her father would not allow him to go in and said, I really thought that you had utterly hated her, so I gave her to your companion. Why don't you take her younger sister? As sick as that sounds. Well, Samson, in his uncontrolled rage, okay, he gets 300 foxes. Now, I got all sorts of questions. Did he catch 300 foxes? Really? Alone? Tie their tails together? Put a torch between the tails? That's what it says. That's what it says. And loose them in the harvest grain field and destroy everything. Destroy everything. Always after, you might say, revenge on them. So he lights some fire, and they take through. When we get into a little bit further down in chapter 15 and verses 13 and 14, people from his hometown, from Judah, come because the Philistines, remember, they're occupied by the Philistines and controlled by the Philistines. And Samson's creating all this havoc, and he's Jewish. He's from the tribe of Dan. And they're all ticked off. So then 3,000, verse 11, men of Judah went down to the cleft of the rock of Edom and said to Samson, do you not know that the Philistines are ruler over us? Have you lost your mind? What are you doing to these folks? They own us. What then is this that you have done to us? And he said to them, as they have done to me, so have I done to them. In other words, payback, revenge. And they said, listen, we have come down to bind you and to give you into the hands of the Philistines. And Samson said, swear to me that you will not attack me yourselves. So they bind him up. Okay, skip down to verse 14. When he had come to Levi, the Philistines came shouting to meet him. Here we go. Then the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him. How in the world can the Spirit of God get on this kind of man? Okay? In the same way that he can get on us. Okay? So how does Samson respond? And the ropes that they were around his arm became as flax, and that has fire, and his bonds melted off his hands, and he found a fresh jawbone of a donkey. Dead body. Here we go again. Dead body. And put out his hand and took it, and with the jawbone of an ass, he kills 1,000 men. So now he's violated the vow again. Down in verse 18. And he was very thirsty. It's been a busy day, 300 foxes. It's been kind of a busy day, okay? Unfortunately, in chapter 15, no sex, okay? But it's looming, trust me, okay? And he was very thirsty, and he called upon the Lord. You have granted this great salvation. You have allowed me to deliver and to take the life of these 1,000 people by your hand of the servant. And now I shall die of thirst and fall into their hands. Come on, God, don't let me down. We only find him praying twice. Both selfish. Give me a drink, okay, and help me kill others. Those are his two prayer requests. When we get to chapter 16, okay, get to chapter 16. Samson went to Gaza, and there he saw a prostitute. Philistine. I mean, can't you find a lady of the night in your own backyard? No, I just kind of like the Philistine women. I don't know what it was here. And he went into her. The Gaza people were there. Samson's here. They surrounded the place, set an ambush for him all night long in the city. They kept quiet all night long, saying, let us wait. City's fortified. There's a gate. Gate's locked. Let us wait till the light of the morning, and then we'll kill him. But Samson lay still till midnight. At midnight he arose. Listen. And he took hold of the doors of the gate of the city and the two posts and pulled them up, bar and all, put them on his shoulders, and carried them to the top of the hill. You see, all of these great feasts of strength. Now, I ask you, have you ever seen a picture of Samson that he didn't look like Schwarzenegger in his prime? Never, okay? I personally think that is a very untrue picture, okay? And the reason I think that is the Philistines keep asking, and Delilah, as you see, keep asking, wait a minute, if this guy was cut like me, that's a joke, okay? And just muscle, okay? You don't have to ask, what's the source of your strength? It's obvious. But they keep asking, how come you're so strong when you look so normal? Because God was on him. God was on him. God was on him. So he picks this up, okay, and then he storms out of the city. Now, in verse 4, we pick up, and after this, okay, he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek. Pause. Sorek was a valley where the best of the vines were grown. So where is he now? Back in the vineyard. Back in the vineyard. And lusting like crazy. So the lords of the Philistines come to her and say to her, seduce him and see where his great strength lies. Why seek the source of his strength if the guy looks like Schwarzenegger? But he doesn't. He looks like me, just taller. Okay? That they may bind him and humble him, and we will give you 1,100 pieces of silver. Okay? They're doing a barter. Turn him in, find the source of his strength, and in modern day, we'll give you $56,000. Okay, and so we know the whole story, and here, he lies to her 3 times. Please tell me your source of where your strength lies and how you might be bound. So he said, well, if you bind me with 7 fresh bowstrings, okay, and if you know the story, and she bound him with him, I'm saying to myself, what? I mean, here is this man with unbelievable strength, and he says, bind me, tie me up, and he lets her. You know, I'm sorry, my mind goes crazy. Are we talking kinky sex here? What are we talking about here? Tie me up? And he lets her do this. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. And again, he lies. Now, all right, let me go on down to verse 13. Okay. Then Delilah said to him, until now you have mocked me. Ladies, this is so unfair. Okay. You have mocked me. You've told me lies. You tell me how you've been bound. He tells her what to do. He allows her to do it. Each time she opens the door and tells the Philistines to come in and get him. Okay? And he keeps letting her do this. Philistines running. Whoops, he's still strong. Let's go back. Okay. It's chaos. If you weave the 7 locks of my head with the web and put them in a knot and fasten it tight with a pin, then I will become weak. Notice, okay, this is the third lie. Okay, still not the source of his strength. But notice how close he's getting to violating the third and final vow. Don't cut your hair. Okay? Close. And I'll repeat this in a minute. Before you do wrong, you'll usually do almost wrong. And that's where he is. That's where he is. So here, he ends up telling her, don't cut my hair. They come in, they cut the hair. She gets her $56,000. They arrest him. They gouge out his eyes. When we come to the last part of the chapter, he's blind. Okay, he's grinding a mill, and they want him to come out and entertain them, make sport of him, humiliate him. And there were about 3,000 men and women that were gathered together. Now I'm going to read the final verses, beginning in verse 28. Then Samson called to the Lord, and he said, "O Lord God, please remember me, and please strengthen me only this once." Oh, why? Not to honor God. Not to honor God. Okay. That I may be avenged on the Philistines for my 2 eyes. God, it's not about you. It's still about me. What amazes me is that God in his grace still honors it. Okay? Then he bowed with all his strength, and the house fell upon the lords and upon all the people who were in it. So the dead who killed at his death were more than those he had killed during his entire life, and he killed thousands. Okay? Then his brothers and sisters and all his family came down and took him and brought him and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of his father. Manoah is probably still living, but in that day there were family tombs, and he gets buried in the family tomb, and he had judged Israel for 20 years. So a mixture of unfaithfulness and faithfulness, but yet God used him. Okay, so what are the lessons? And boy, there are many. Okay, so let me walk through them one by one. Number one, ability and opportunity do not guarantee success, nor does a good start. All of us know people. As far as you know, we're birthed into Christian homes and raised into Christian values. And if they ever had any journey with the Lord, they abandoned that years ago and still walk a wayward path. And yet they had parents who loved God and loved God. He had it all. Miraculous birth, godly home, great credentials, unique call, supernatural power, all of those. And he spent most of his life chasing minnows, like the whales. He forfeited everything that he did through carelessness and compromise. I told Linda when I was just preparing this, I said, you know what, I can close my eyes and I can go back 40 plus years. And I could even go back to prior to coming here, that far back. And names and faces, mostly men, but not exclusively men, who had what seemed to be a real, genuine beginning with the Lord, and then who blew it all. A few of those returned, most of them did not. They did not. Second lesson, godly parents will have kids who fail. Many of us in this room need to hear that, including me. Okay? All you can do is do your best, and even that will not be perfect. That will not be perfect. They were good folks. They were godly folks. They prayed. They sacrificed. God heard them. They wanted the best for their son. They counseled their son. They gave guidance to their son, and he didn't care one whit about his godly heritage. He thought he knew better than his Christian parents. His parents were only one thing to him: thing getters. Go get her for me. Go get her for me. Thing getters. Third lesson, don't live to please self. Over and again, for me, for me, for me, for me, for me. Everything's for him, never about others. He lived for lust and revenge. That's all he lived for. Next, personal discipline is essential. Personal discipline is essential. He lacked self-control. He was angry and he couldn't control it, and he was lustful and he couldn't manage it. He conquered everyone but himself. We know him for his strength. What he should be known for are his weaknesses, not his strengths. Years ago, Hillary Clinton was introducing her husband Bill at a meeting. And the New York Times reported, she said this in introducing him. Part of growing up is learning how to control your impulses. That's Hillary speaking on behalf of Bill. I think somewhere he missed it. He was always alone, never had any friends, okay? Next, it's dangerous to flirt with sin. He never took his vow or sin seriously. He kept living on the edge. He kept pushing the envelope. He kept going near the vineyard over and over. He kept going into the harlots over and over. He played with fire. He ignored all of the warnings that were given to him. He disregarded his vows. And it's bad enough to disregard your vows, which he had done. Then he makes a joke of it and making up the riddle. I mean, it's bad enough to disobey, but when you joke about it, you've reached a whole new depth of spiritual demise when you do that. And before, just remember, this is not another lesson, it's another, before you do wrong, you'll do almost wrong. That's a warning. Okay? Two more. Next, there's a price to pay for compromise. There's a price to pay for compromise. The law of harvest is always true. You reap what you sow later than you sow. He showed he sowed disrespect. He showed lack of discipline. He sowed lust and immorality. He sowed uncontrolled anger, and he lost everything. He lost his strength. He lost his freedom. He lost his sight. He lost his power. He lost his witness. He lost his chance to serve God and to be dedicated to him. And because of that, he caused God to be dishonored, his family to be dishonored, and his people to be dishonored. But God didn't chasten him until he broke the last vow. Talking about patience. Talking about grace. Okay. God gave him warning after warning, like he did Lot and like he did Achan. But he refused to listen. And then last, it's always ending on a positive note, God still uses failures. And he used him at the end. What I didn't tell you is, I don't think, is we see all of this weaknesses in his life, and yet his name is mentioned in Hebrews chapter 11 in the roll call of faith. Just his name, but he's mentioned there. Samson, like those wells, okay, gave his life to trivial pursuits, uncontrolled sensuality, pleasing himself, and petty revenge. And like those whales, he died. He died. He's only remembered for what he destroyed. As I said, his life is more defined by his weaknesses than his strengths. God, the thing we need to remember, even sprinkled throughout those 4 chapters, largely about weakness, failure, and sin and disobedience, it still said repeatedly, and God was with him. To me, that's a signal of hope for every one of us, because our lives, like Samson, like Lot, like Moses, like Abraham, like Adam, like Eve, we are a mixture of following God and of not following God. We're a mixture of both of those. But God never leaves us. God never forsakes us, as I've said in the last few lessons. He covers us in His blood. He doesn't cover up our sin. He wants us to come back to Him and to respond to Him. His grace is always greater, always greater. Say, Jimmy, you don't know what I've done. No, but God does. Okay? And He is ready and able to forgive. Okay? We never can out-sin His grace. Ever out-sin His grace. How great is our God. Amen? Amen.
Stand with me as we sing this song. I hope you'll know the words. How great is our God. Sing with me, how great is our God. And all will see how great is our God. The splendor of a king, clothed in majesty. Let all the earth rejoice, all the earth rejoice. He wraps Himself in light, and darkness tries to hide, and trembles at His voice, and trembles at His voice. How great is our God. Sing with me, how great is our God. And all will see how great is our God. Name above all names, worthy of our praise. My heart will sing, how great is our God. How great is our God. Sing with me, how great is our God. And all will see how great is our God.
Lord, you are great indeed, great in mercy, great in grace, always greater than any and all failures, any and all sins in our lives. And in your grace and mercy, help us to believe that you're good, that you always and only have our best in mind in your plans. And when we fail, and we will, that we will confess it and learn the valuable lessons from it and be better moving forward. In Jesus' name we pray. And everybody said, Amen. Be seated if you would. Here are the questions for discussion on the story of Samson. Okay? Thanks, guys.